And nobody's there telling you that, there is a different way for you to process because your brain is different.
Please tell us more about you and about what you are doing.
Yes. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a clinical neuroscientist. I ran a private practice where I help families who had children with autism spectrum disorders before I decided to step out of private practice and the healthcare setting to serve in a bigger way, to work in the prevention side of things as far as optimizing humanity's potential. And of course, I can say I'm not only the doctor, I'm also a former patient of this whole thing, because as I went through my postdoctorate in neurodevelopmental disorders, I discovered that growing up, I actually had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this was before the diagnosis existed. So I was always unanimously described by my teachers as this bright but mischievous kid that would spend the first 10 minutes getting the point of the lesson and spend the remaining 50 minutes interrupting and disrupting the class and my neighbors. So I was not an easy child. So I always start by apologizing to teachers and parents alike for my kind, basically. But I'm glad to be here and I've made it to this point.
About that, can you tell us more about your journey and how everything fell into now being Dr. L, the Whisperer?
Absolutely. Well, I always joke that it's a miracle that I lasted in academia as long as I did. And it was not easy for me. And in fact, that became part of my mission. When I was in practice, I would see the kids that were 6, 7, 10, 12 years of age coming to us, and we were getting great results with them, getting the diagnosis removed and helping the families kind of regroup and optimize the future of their children. But the trouble was that they had already gone through that tender childhood period, and the kids had realized that they are different than those around them. And somehow they had internalized that as there is a problem with me. And also, parenting a child on the spectrum is not the usual standard parenting. So usually there's a lot of parental and parenting tensions as well. And then depending on how you were brought up, the couples oftentimes would be arguing and not agreeing on the best approach on the parenting, which would cause spousal relationship issues. And to cascade it even further, with the challenges that the children are facing, the parents wanted to do the best that they could. So oftentimes I would see that they're trying to throw everything as far as therapies are concerned into kids' lives, hoping that something sticks. And so they were financially strapped because of it as well. And that was the reason why I decided to step away from my private practice. My private practice was an award-winning practice, but I decided to step away from it because I did not want the children and the families to go through what I had gone through, to experience those difficulties that I experienced growing up. You see, when I was growing up, I grew up in Iran during the revolution and then the Iran-Iraq war. And having a condition like ADHD was not very conducive to the environment and the situation at the time, because in order for you to be able to make a career, to go on with your life, you had to pass this national university entrance exam. And unless you were in the top 1% of the academic performers in the entire country, you were sent to the front lines to fight in the battlefields. So this was really a life and death situation. And as a child, you don't get the point of that. You're just growing up and oblivious to these dangers and these situations. So that pressure fell on my parents. And in the process of trying to get an ADHD kid to perform at that level, I would see the frustration in their faces. And again, I would think there's something wrong with me. I would see my younger sister go to school, come back within a couple hours. She was finished with her homework and she was out in the backyard playing. And I wanted to go and play and I couldn't. Later on in college, I would be going to school and I would be coming home and I would look at my homework and it would take me about an hour to read 5 to 8 pages. And I had 80 pages to read as homework. I'm like, I'm never going to finish this. So it affected me morally, morale wise as well, because no matter how hard I would try, I would come short. I wasn't as good. I wasn't good enough compared to other people that seemed to, with ease, be able to tackle these things. And nobody's there telling you that, there is a different way for you to process because your brain is different. So it became a very important thing for me to make sure that people understand and realize that different brains operate differently. And of course, it only took me a postdoctorate to realize that and be able to help people, help them understand the different phases of brain development. And ultimately, that's what I ended up focusing on in practice, and then ultimately in the online world. So I got the title of Parent Whisperer because in many cases, if you learn to work with the body, with the brain development, this is basically 21st century medicine, then you actually can improve things instead of having to fight against the body, fight against the current to go ahead and make a change happen, which oftentimes, because you're fighting against the system, is going to be short term with limited and smaller results. So if you can work with the body, it becomes almost effortless. The results become sustainable and lasting, and in many cases, actually fun, and instead of being grudgingly difficult.